who, may I say, I'm very excited to talk about because he's going to educate me, and that is Mark Lewisohn. And I need to make sure I've got the right Mark Lewisohn here. So, are you the Mark Lewisohn who is regarded as one of the world's leading authorities on the Beatles?
I seem to be. Yes, I think you've got the right one.
Okay, are you the academic triple threat of writer, researcher, and historian?
Yes, I am.
Are you the Mark Lewisohn who is credited with finding out who came up with the comedy line, Ringo isn't the best drummer in the world, he isn't even the best drummer in the Beatles?
I guess I am.
Who was it?
I am. Well, I thought it was Jasper Carrott, and I contacted his office and they said that it was Jasper, but in fact I found it earlier still in an old Radio 4 sketch comedy show called Radioactive. Yes.
And a final one, just to make sure we've got the right person. Are you the Mark Lewisohn who sleeps every night in bespoke Beatles bedding dressed as Sergeant Pepper?
Yes.
I love it. It is great to have you on, Mark, because we are talking partly about the 50th anniversary of Abbey Road, which is this year. That was the last work of the Beatles, and you have put together something called Hornsey Road, which is a stage show all about that album.
That's right. It's a celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Abbey Road album, which was September 1969. It was the last thing they did. And Hornsey Road is a look at the people who made it and how they made it and the extraordinary times that we were all living through in that period in the end of the 1960s.
And in your mind, because you are a bit... Obsessive's the wrong word. Are you an obsessive about the Beatles?
No.
Are you an expert?
I've been enthusiastic about the Beatles all my life, and I only realised this last night. 40 years ago, I began to research them, what they did and when they did it and how they did it and all of that, all the tales around everything that they did. And 40 years on, I'm still doing it and still finding new things every day.
I was introduced to the Beatles through Oasis. I think if you grew up during the Britpop era, they were a band that in some ways introduced the Beatles to a whole audience who had known nothing about them before that.
Yeah, they did, absolutely. And even that is now 25 years ago. People have always been influenced by the Beatles. In the 60s, I mean, their influence was palpable on almost everybody. But every now and again, you get a little splurge like Britpop that really revives it. And there'll be another one along in due course. Hard to know when or from which direction. But artistry of that calibre is always going to permeate and be discovered by people and then turned on for a new generation.
Now, this might be an unanswerable question. Is Abbey Road the best Beatles album?
Many say that it is. It's really hard to compare. I mean, first of all, that's a purely subjective question and answer. So, I mean, you know, one person's best is another person's worst.
To you?
It's a joint best with about 7 or 8 others. I mean, it certainly is a fantastic piece of work, and it was the last thing they did. They went out, this band that had been huge throughout the decade and made pioneering, groundbreaking work with every single thing they did, continually furthering where music can go, finished on the ultimate high of Abbey Road. It is an extraordinary piece of work. They broke up before it was released. They finished as a band, and in the 1-month interlude between its recording and its release, they were finished.
Part of your stage show, Hornsey Road, I would guess, possibly talks about where the album title came from for Abbey Road?
Yes, there's going to be a section looking at why they called it Abbey Road, but also the incredible influence that album cover has had. I don't know if you saw the pictures of the 50th anniversary of the photograph that was taken August the 8th, 69, the Beatles on the zebra crossing. Well, it was August the 8th this year. The traffic was stopped on Abbey Road. It's on YouTube. You can see it. It's just incredible. Hundreds upon hundreds of people were standing there singing. The Beatles brought then and still now enormous happiness into the world. And that is a very hard thing to achieve. And sometimes, like now, it's more welcome than ever. The Abbey Road Studios website has a webcam permanently trained on the crossing, and you can look at it any time. I look at it on my phone from time to time. There's always shenanigans going on there, people walking in bare feet and people stopping in the middle of the road. It's amazing we haven't had fatalities there in the last 50 years. But the Beatles' popularity doesn't seem to be diminishing in that respect at all.
I just jumped onto the webcam if you heard me tapping away at a keyboard there. I can tell you there's a lot of people stood there taking photos of each other as they walk across it.
Yeah.
Back in the day, when they first came out, when they were first releasing albums, I remember speaking to my mum about this. As I said before, Britpop came out, and a lot of my friends became obsessed with the Beatles through that. It became cool to like the Beatles. My mum always referenced the fact that back in the day, if you liked the Beatles, you weren't cool. Cool people like the Rolling Stones.
No, your mum was wrong on that one. Sorry, Mum.
Mum!
I hope she's not listening.
Possibly.
No, there's something to what she says, but there's a lot more to it than that. First of all, we all talk about albums now, but in the 60s, the key market was singles, and the Beatles were dominant in the singles market. Everyone was a number one. Because of the Beatles, the Stones came up. The Stones were kind of propelled to fame by a man called Andrew Loog Oldham, who had been working for the Beatles, and he wanted a band of his own, and he set them as the antithesis of the Beatles deliberately. And they were designed, in effect, to appeal to people who didn't want to be Beatles fans, or because Beatles fans were substantially girls, although they always had fans of both sexes. And the Stones could reach out to people and go, oh, you don't like the Beatles, do you? I like the Stones. And it became one of those school playground things. But the Stones appealed to the rebel in people, though the Beatles were the most rebellious band of all time. And also the Stones were fantastic, of course. Yeah, they were wonderful, and they still are.
I'm definitely going to try and come and see you when you do Hornsey Road. 21-date tour, isn't it?
25, I
25?
think. We've added some more. Yes, we're playing some places that weren't on the initial list.
I feel it's a lovely Friday. We're heading into a bank holiday weekend. If we take Abbey Road as an album, what song do you think we should play right now, and why?
Well, it's an album full of beautiful songs. I mean, the melodies and the harmonies on Abbey Road are so joyful and uplifting. But on a nice day like this in August 2019, I think the appropriate song would be Here Comes the Sun.
I think it would be. Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.